Well, hello everybody. Good evening. So today we are going to be looking at a different number of different things and try and tie them all together. The first thing is this Shabbat, on Saturday in other words, is the beginning of the new month of Shevat. The 11th month of the year in the Hebrew calendar. Now, as I mentioned before, each month has what's called a tzeruf, a permutation of the name Yud He Vav He, Yud Ke Vav Ke, or as we say Havaya, a permutation of the name Havaya, which is associated with a verse. And it also has a particular part of the body that it's relevant to, a particular one of the constellations that it's relevant to, and also a part of the body, and a chush, a part of the body, and a chush. A chush is it's usually translated as talent or a sense. As I mentioned before, in Sefer Yetzirah, you have 12 senses, not just the 5 that we know about. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And also about the concept of potentiality and actuality. And then we're going to try and tie all of these concepts together. So, let us begin. The month of Shevat, or the 11th month, Shevat, S-H-E-V-A-T, Shevat, or Shin Bet Tet in the Hebrew. The month of Shevat, the 11th month, corresponds to the tribe of Asher, A-S-H-E-R, Asher. But the power of the month, or the sense of the month, is the sense of eating food. So if anyone noticed, did I not start recording yet? I think I did, didn't I? Let me see if I'm recording. I should be recording. 1 second. Yeah, it's recording already. Yeah. So it's the sense of eating. So if anyone's particularly hungry this month, you'll understand why, because your sense of eating has been awakened, because it's the month of Shvat coming up, even though it didn't start yet. It's only going to start on Sabbath, on Shabbat, a couple of days, Saturday. So in any event, the month of eating. Now, and the part of the body that is associated with it is obviously the stomach. Now, what does that have to do with anything? It's kind of a strange thing, but one has to know that eating is not just an activity which we do in order to keep ourselves alive, or in order to give ourselves pleasure. There's a whole slew, gamut of ideas associated with the idea of eating as a holy act. Now, it might seem to be a strange thing, but in Jewish thought, this is not strange at all. In fact, eating plays an extremely important part of many, many Jewish rituals. The old joke is, any Jewish holiday is basically, we were under threat of death. God saved us, let's eat. That's basically sums up most Jewish festivals, but there's a lot more to it than that, as you no doubt understand. So, the whole concept of eating in Kabbalah has primarily to do, first and foremost, with the idea of elevating the sparks of holiness. One of the ways of elevating the sparks of holiness is by ingesting or imbibing foods and drinks which are kosher, which have proper kosher components, etc. They're made kosher food. And let me just explain what kosher, the difference between kosher and not kosher is for a minute. After the shattering of the vessels of the world of Tohu, which is spoken about at the beginning of Genesis, the beginning of Bereshis, right in the first chapter, so in the first few verses, in fact. So right after that, it's explained in Kabbalah, and it's a great, we've had lessons on this, so I'm not going to go into it now, but sparks of holiness became embedded in what later came to be lower levels of creation, lower levels of existence. These sparks of holiness became embedded in many different levels, and in all the objects that exist in the world, there's a spark of holiness. Only what? In some cases, the spark of holiness is kosher. It means that it is fit to be raised up to its original place. And in some cases, it is asur. Asur means bound up. It's so bound into the physicality of the thing that it cannot be raised up, at least not through the normal course of fulfilling the commandments and so on and so forth. There's certain ways in which it can be raised up, but kind of unusual, in unusual circumstances, not in the regular circumstances. So, in any event, the idea is therefore that through eating, these sparks that are buried in the world, buried in creation, and buried therefore in food, can be elevated through eating the food, and then the spark, if one uses the energy that one got from the food in the proper way, in a holy way, in a positive way, that raises up the spark to a higher level. If one uses the food not only in a holy way, but for the sake of a command, in fulfilling a commandment, for instance, eating matzah on Passover and various other things like that, sanctifying the Sabbath on wine and on eating bread and so on. So these are ways in which the holiness of the sparks can be elevated and returned to their former stature. It's a whole long teaching, and I don't really want to go into it so much now. What I do want to go into is the idea of that eating can in fact be a holy act. And in fact, more holy than not eating. Yes, there are times that one has to fast, and there are set times in the Jewish calendar when everybody fasts, and there are times that people make their own fasts for whatever reason. They feel they need to fast or have some kind of reason for fasting as a penitence or whatever, although that's not necessarily an advisable thing. But in any event, there are times when fasting is seen, and in many other approaches to holiness, fasting is seen as a very positive and very beneficial thing. In Jewish thought, and particularly in Hasidic thought, it's not so, fasting is not so revered as a method of purification. It's much more difficult but much more productive to eat in a holy way than it is to fast in a holy way. Now, it is true that there were certain people that just spent a lot of time fasting, like the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria. He fasted a lot, and so did the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov claimed that he wasn't actually fasting, he just didn't eat, didn't have time, or didn't have inclination, didn't feel like eating. But this would go on for days. In fact, it says about the Baal Shem Tov that he would not eat from Sabbath to Sabbath. He would only eat on Sabbath, and then he wouldn't eat the whole week. Eat or drink, not at night, not during the day, not anything. But let's not go, let's not go there ourselves, because in our generations, this is actually something harmful, and we don't do it. The very fact that Sefer Yetzirah explains that one of the chushim, one of the talents, one of the senses of the soul is the sense of eating, gives us an idea, gives us the inkling that eating itself is implanted. The whole concept of eating and eating in a holy way, eating in a special way, is implanted in creation. In other words, there are times when we have to fast. Those are the rules. But most of the time, it is far more beneficial to eat, but in a holy way. And that's what the month of Shevat is all about. Now, this month, there is there's a disagreement amongst the sages. The sages explain that there's actually 4 New Years during the year. Now, I know that sounds a little weird that there's 4 New Years, but the 4 New Years are, one is the New Year of, there's a New Year for kings, and there's a New Year for various other things, and the New Year of the year for which we commemorate or we celebrate on the first day of Tishrei, which is the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. But one of the New Years that is mentioned in the Mishnah is the New Year of trees. Now, what does it mean there's a New Year for trees? It doesn't mean the trees necessarily go out and start celebrating a New Year and get drunk and so on and so forth. We don't do that either, but the trees don't do that. So, what does it mean that there's a New Year for trees? Well, practically speaking, in order to be able to determine the age of a tree for Jewish legal purposes, for purposes of Jewish law, for the orla, the first 3 years of a tree, we don't eat the fruits thereof, the first 3 years. The 4th year, the fruits have to be taken up to Israel if you live in Israel. Taken up to Jerusalem, rather, if you live in Israel. And when that was in temple times. And then the fruits are permissible from then on. So how do you determine the years, the first 3 years and the 4th year, if you don't have a beginning point? So there has to be a beginning point for all trees. And that is in this coming up month, in the month of Shevat. Now, regarding the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year of Trees, is a disagreement in the Mishnah. There's a disagreement between 2 sages that argue a lot about a lot of different things, Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai, 2 sages from about probably the 1st century. There might have been even earlier than that. Hillel and Shammai. They were very, very great sages, both of them. And one said, Shammai said that the New Year for trees is on the 1st of this coming month, the 1st of Shevat. Hillel argued that it's not on the 1st of the month, it's on the 15th of the month, is the month that we should set as the New Year for trees. What was the basis of their disagreement? Well, the basis of all their disagreements, essentially, the basis of all of the disagreements between Hillel and Shammai, is if we look at the potential of something or we look at its actuality. But Shammai looked at the potential. At the beginning of Shevat already, that's the beginning of the time, the first time when the sap in the trees starts to rise up the tree. But Hillel says, yeah, that's true, I don't disagree with you, but the sap is not rising up into the tree fully until the 15th of the month, about 2 weeks, 15 days later, right? 2 weeks later. Then the sap is flowing through the various, I don't know what capillaries, arteries, I don't exactly know what you call them in a tree, but anyway, whatever they're called, the sap is starting to rise into the branches itself. So the argument, therefore, between Shammai and Hillel is the argument between potential or actual. I'll get to you in a second with that question, Dennis. Hold on a few minutes. So Shammai says we look at the potential of something as it's just about to start working. That's why I have a tree here in the picture on the screen, or the initial picture. I don't know if you're still seeing it, but in any event, Whereas Hillel says, no, we have to look at the actuality thereof. We have to look at the actuality. We have to look at what's actually happening on the ground. It has to be in practice already and not just in theory on the verge of. It has to be happening in fact. And that is the disagreement essentially between the two. Now, they don't disagree only in terms of when the sap starts rising in the tree. They disagree on many, many other things based on this idea. Shammai always looked sort of at the future potential of something, how something is going to develop in the future. Whereas Hillel said, I don't have that ability to be able to figure out what's going to happen in the future. I can only work on things as they are right now. So what does that mean in terms of our divine service? Well, Shammai kind of looked at the future and he worked his way backwards, you could say. I looked at the future, what's going to be in the future, and he worked his way backwards to where we are right now. So we're now on the verge of the future beginning, which is true. And therefore, we have to work towards that future, which we can sense coming down the road, or which we can understand based on the various writings of the prophets and so on. And we work our way backwards until to where we are now. Hillel said, no, that's not the way things unfold, because if we extrapolate backwards from the future to the present, there's many, many paths that can lead us to the future. And even though the future might already have been determined to a certain extent by God, although we don't know what that future is, so it doesn't affect our free choice. But nevertheless, what we have to do is we have to look at the actuality. We have to look at what's actually going on the ground. So think about it, let's say, for example, in terms of education, right? One could always think about what it is that you want to turn out, what you want to happen in the end, right? What the end point should be. And it's a very good thing to do that. There's no question about it. Very good thing to do that. Very positive and very, very effective. But if one looks at the future and determines what the future should be, what the future is supposed to be, but you don't look at what's actually happening on the ground, then you get into all these kind of theoretical entanglements which never really work, right? If we're always working towards a sort of some idealized or idealistic image of something, the way it ought to be, we're not dealing with the practical facts on the ground of the way the things are. To get from point A, where things are now, to point B, where things ought to be, so you can let the future pull you forward, or you can let the present push you forward. Now, pulling from the future to the present is actually, although it's possible, it's somewhat unrealistic, because it's not in the future yet, and the future didn't happen yet, and therefore there's no way to really trace all the steps that are needed in order to really get there. Whereas, if we look at the present situation, we look at the way things are with a completely open mind, but with an honest eye, and we see how things are right now, we know immediately what it is that needs rectification next, right? What needs the rectification next. That's only by looking at things the way they are right now. Okay. To a certain extent, we can relate this to the concept of food, the concept of eating, because eating a theoretical meal is not going to satisfy anybody's stomach. But if you have the meal in front of you, then you can already start to satisfy your hunger by the meal that's in front of you. It's not going to help to sort of imagine some kind of rosy future. To a certain extent, you could say that this is the failure of many ideologies in the world. For example, I don't want to get into politics here, but for example, just as an example, communist ideology. Communist ideology pictures a world where everyone is going to live in harmony and everyone is going to live in peace and everyone gives according to his ability and takes according to his needs and so on. It's a very idealistic world and it's completely impractical. It doesn't take into account human nature. It doesn't take into account the facts on the ground. On the other hand, of course, looking at just what exists in the present without having a vision of the way things should be in the future is probably not going to lead to much progress either. So really we have to have both. We have to have both modes of operation. The current actual mode and the future mode. This explains to us one of the things that we read about in last week's Torah reading, where Moses comes across the burning bush and God gives him a message that he's going to be sending him into Egypt and he's going to be sending him on this mission to take the Jewish people out of Egypt and into redemption, eventually into the land of Israel. Now, Moses is kind of perplexed. He said, who shall I tell them sent me? Because obviously I can't come in my own name. I can't come in my own name simply because who am I? I was someone that was brought up essentially in the palace. Moses was brought up in the palace. He was put into, there was a decree at that point in time. Pharaoh's prognosticators, his soothsayers, his seers, whatever you want to call them, had predicted that a savior would arise from the Jewish people who would take the Jewish people out of Egypt. So that year, he commanded that all male children be thrown into the Nile River. All male children of both Jewish and non-Jewish children. So they knew that this was a decree. Obviously, the people did not throw their own children into the Nile, but they were taken by force by the Egyptian soldiers or whatever, the kind of KGB at that particular time, and they threw the children into the Nile. Now, Yocheved, who was Moses' mother, understood what was going on, and she knew that his life would be in danger. She had the baby early, instead of at 9 months, at 7 months. And she put the baby in a basket and into the river in a basket. That's how he was saved, because he was seen there by Pharaoh's daughter. He was in the water, he was thrown into the water, so the various seers and soothsayers knew that he'd been in the water. They just didn't know that he wasn't drowned in the water. They knew he was in the water, so everything was okay now. So Pharaoh's daughter then brings him back to the palace, brings him up in the palace. In any event, Moses brought up in the palace, and when he goes into the desert after he flees from Pharaoh, long, complicated story, let's not get into it now. He flees from Pharaoh and he lands up in Midian, in a country called Midian, where the Midianites are, and he marries Jethro's daughter. And then he's one day out feeding the flocks, so pasturing the flocks out in the desert, and he sees this burning bush, and he's given this mission to go and redeem the Jewish people, take them out of captivity and take them out of slavery and bring them into the land of Israel. So he asks, who shall I say sent me? And God says to him, Eheyeh asher eheyeh, I will be that which I will be. In other words, let's not try and understand what that exactly means, but the point is that it's something that's going to be in the future, right? Eheyeh asher eheyeh. I will be in the future whatever it is that I will be in the future. In other words, I can't describe it to you now. I can't tell you now what that will be in the future, but the future will come about, and that's what I will be. That's who sent you. That's who's sending you. The future is sending you into the present in order to extract the present and bring it into the future. Now, this actually fits very well with a concept that is explained in the Zohar, that sorry, it's not explained in the Zohar, in a book called Sefer HaTmuna, the book of images, Sefer HaTmuna, an ancient Kabbalistic work written by someone named Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana. In any event, he writes there that the soul of Moses did not come from the world of tikkun, from the world of rectification. His soul came from the world of tohu, from the world of chaos, but from that aspect of the world of chaos which had not broken up. As we know, the world of chaos, the world of tohu, as I said before, when the vessels of the world of tohu shattered, and all the holiness of those vessels became embedded within creation. So that only applies to the 7 lower sfirot, but not to the highest sfirot. The highest sfirot did not break apart, they did not disintegrate, and or as the expression is used, they did not die. And Moses was drawn from that aspect of the world of tohu that did not die, that was still alive. So he was drawn from there into the present. He was drawn from the future. Why the future? Why is tohu the world of the future? Because the rectification of the world of tohu is what we're aiming for. And when that rectification is complete, that becomes the Messianic era. So that is in the future. So he's sent from the future, so to speak, into the present in order to bring those living in the present into the future. Okay. So that is the word Eheyeh. Eheyeh asher eheyeh, I will be what I will be in the future, and that will be revealed in the future. Moses says to God, I can't I can't tell them this is first of all, it's too complicated. And secondly, enough for them that they have their present sorrows and their present difficulties and so on. What I'm going to mention to them, all the things that they're going to have to go to in order to get to the ultimate messianic future. And what am I going to mention that to them for now? Right? It's not practical now. So he says, no, that wasn't my intention to mention that now. Just mention to them that the future begins today. Yeah, just once. The future begins today. So, in any event, Moses goes along to, and he takes eventually he takes the Jewish people out of Egypt, and he starts bringing them towards the future. But he starts bringing them towards the future from the present. He doesn't show them the future. He just brings them. He rectifies the present in order to bring them to the future. So this is very much like the argument between Hillel and Shammai. Shammai foresaw the future and wanted to elicit the future and bring it into the present. Hillel said, no, we have to take the present the way it is and bring that into the future. And that is, in fact, the way that things are done. That is, the Jewish law decides that the method of Hillel is the more practical, and not only the more practical, but the path that is worthy for the current world in which we live and for the vast majority of people. That's the way things have to be. So, in other words, we take stock of the present, and by improving things the way they are in the present, that's how the future is kind of made. Now, let's see here. Let me answer a couple of questions before I continue. So would holy eating be in the attitude of contemplation and or mindfulness? I'm not sure that mindfulness would be the right way. Mindfulness is kind of detachment. But I think contemplation would probably be the more appropriate path. There are various kavanas, there's intentions that one's supposed to have when eating. It depends on which meal one's talking about as well, and so on. But there are sort of meditations that go along with eating. But the basic simple meditation is, first of all, that this food that I have in front of me is not just food. There's a spark of holiness in it, and it's my duty to take the energy from the spark of holiness and elevate it by bringing it into the realm of good deeds, by bringing it into the realm of mitzvot, of commandments, doing the commandments, and using that energy to do the commandments, and using that energy to learn about the divine mind, learning Torah, in other words. So it would be contemplation, would probably be mindfulness. Has it has a lot of different meanings, and probably the most common explanation of mindfulness doesn't really fit in so well. Mindfulness is maybe useful for when people have emotional, overcharged emotionally. Then mindfulness is a good way to go. But contemplation needs more of an active. Contemplation requires active thinking. Mindfulness is more passive, observing. Although, again, there are many definitions, so perhaps you have a different one. Another thing Yonah said, okay, is this also so very simple and so very difficult? Yes, simply because we ourselves get in the way. Either transition on an egotistic status quo involving sort of letting go. Yeah, I mean, letting go is to a certain extent, letting go what? You see, it's a whole different mindset and a whole way of looking at things, which to a certain extent, I would say, does not necessarily fit with the letting go that people are familiar with. What I mean to say is that living in a state that is, let's say, divorced from the world, outside of the world, is only good if you can live in that state in the world. In other words, living beyond the world, a little higher than the world, in the world, that's fine. But living in this sort of, in a world that's kind of divorced from reality, in other words, I'll put it to you this way. The ideal in Kabbalistic life, in Jewish life in general, Kabbalistic life in particular, Hasidic life in particular, is to live a life as a family person with one's spouse and children and so on and so forth, and living a life in the world and doing good, rather than divorcing oneself from the world, going off to live in an ashram or in a monastery or in the Himalayas, in a cave or something like that. That's the easy life. Even though it might seem that, given our perspective now, it might look difficult, but that really, in terms of spiritual quest, it's much easier. There's nothing hassling you, no one bothering you. It's very easy to be holy then. It's not easy to be holy when the neighbor's dog is eating your flowers in the garden, right? It's not easy when your kids are disturbing the neighbor's sleep, whatever it is. These are kinds of things that need constant attention and proper behavior and self-control and so on and so forth in order to be able to deal with them. And therefore, letting go wouldn't necessarily be the right way to describe it. It's much more a way of resolving issues without making them into issues as far as we can, right? Resolving problems without making them into a problem. Okay. All right, folks, any more questions? So therefore, the holy name that was revealed and that will be revealed again in the future is one that talks about the future tense. But that's not the name that we generally use. What we generally use now as a name to focus on or to meditate on is a name that has to do with the present world in which we live. Without going into all the Kabbalistic nuances, the various holy names, But as I mentioned before many times, each name is associated with a certain type of activity, and it's associated with a certain sphera. The name Eheye is associated with the sphera of Keter, which is a transcendent sphera. It's a sphera which transcends the world and will only be revealed really in the future. And that name, therefore, is a name that manifests the future, but we have to start from now, move towards the future, that kind of thing. Okay. Other names have to do with, there's 10 holy names, and all of these 10 names are associated with the 10 Sfirot, as I mentioned before. And the name that we deal with primarily is the name of Yud Hey Vav Hey. Yud Hey Vav Hey. Now, in this week's Torah reading, Moses complains to God that why, you said you were going to redeem this people, and so far life has just gotten worse, right? Things are not gotten better; they've gotten worse. God says, "You'll see shortly what's gonna be, but don't complain so much, because I did not reveal even to the Avos, to the forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I didn't reveal what I have revealed to you and what I am revealing to you. I didn't reveal my transcendent name, Yud Hey Vav Hey, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is nevertheless found in the present. The word Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, stands for Haya past, Hoive present, Yeh future. So the name which spans past, present, and future, I didn't actually reveal to Abraham. I revealed myself to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob as God within nature, but within the boundaries of nature, in a finite sense. The finitude of nature. The word Shin Dalad Yud, the name Shin Dalad Yud, that name, which is associated with the Sphira of Yesod primarily, that name is a name which says, Sha'omarti lo'olami dai, I said to my world, it is enough. It is the name that causes the expansion of the universe to stop, the expansion of physicality to stop. So if physicality stops expanding at a certain point, had it continued to expand indefinitely, and this is even known instant, we wouldn't have had planets. We wouldn't have. In other words, there's just simply in terms of scientific concepts, the whole concept of gravity sort of slows the universe down. It's just right to prevent everything from flying apart completely and not being able to hold to any planets or any, right? In other words, the gravitational constant is such that the world can continue to exist. So, I'll get to that in a second, Wendy. So, just in terms of scientific knowledge of divine power, or let's put it this way, divine power as it is manifested in the physical universe, is what was revealed to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What was revealed to Moses was the transcendent aspect of godliness, but the transcendent aspect of godliness, which is past, present, and future all at the same time. The other name, that's the future to come, which doesn't exist in the present. That's the future which does not exist in the present, and certainly not in the past. So, I know this is getting a little bit complicated, but the idea, therefore, is that Moses is told, you have the potential to bind together past, present, and future through the Torah that I am giving you. It's called Torah Havaya, Torah Hashem, the Torah, the teachings of God, which bind together past, present, and future, and bring the past and the present into the future. What will be revealed in the future, we don't know yet. The transcendent, completely transcendent Keter aspect of things will be revealed in the future, but we don't know exactly how it will be revealed or in what that means. But that is the idea of the various names that are revealed in these last two Torah readings, the first two in the book of Exodus. The name Ehyeh, the name Shin Dalad Yud, and the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud Hey Vav Hey. All right. Is it true that Moses was born in the month of Shevat? No, he was born in the month of Adar. That's the last month of the year, the 12th month. He was born in the 12th month. He was born in the 12th month and passed away in the 12th month. In fact, on the same day. He was born on the 7th of Adar and he passed away on the 7th of Adar. Not this month that's coming, but the one after that. Okay, any other questions?